Hello, everyone. It's going to give people some time to join us on Facebook and YouTube. Hi, everybody. I hope everyone had a good week. Everything looks good here. Let me get my chat app up on the top so I can see if anyone's talking to me. There we go. Be sure to put any comments you have if you're on Zoom in the chat or on Facebook and YouTube in the comments so that I can see them. I like to hear from everyone. Hello to everybody. I'll just wait a couple of more minutes here before we get started and let people come in and join us as people find out we're here. Who else is here? Oh, Mr. and Mrs. McCabe are here. Mrs. McGann, Mr. Davis. Hello, everyone. We have some people on Zoom, some of my regular friends here on Zoom tonight. So I hope everyone had a good week. I've been preparing all week for tonight's presentation, so hope you'll enjoy it very much. That's Mr. Q you hear banging around in the background there. It's the 21st century Mr. Q. I'll tell you about the 18th century Mr. Q in a moment when we have more people here. Mr. Nelson, hello. I'm hoping Mr. Talmadge is going to join us tonight. I'm not sure. I forgot to remind him, but hope he got the reminders. Yes, Mr. Q, the modern Mr. Q, is enjoying his retirement very much with quite a few projects he's been working on. So he's very happy to be home and not working as a aircraft mechanic out in the winter cold. So he's quite happy to be here. The sound is a bit tinny. Oh, let me move my microphone a little closer. Let me know if that sounds better. Does that sound better, Ms. McGann? Does that improve the sound at all? Hello, Ms. Wallace. You're in New Jersey. And if the rest of you think the sound is funny, let me know because I can make some adjustments on my microphone. I'm working with some new sound hardware, so I haven't had quite as much time to test it out to see how it's sounding. So if it's sounding a little bad, it's still tinny. Well, let me make an adjustment here on the back of my microphone. And tell me if that makes it sound better. Guys on Zoom, is that better or worse? It's not as good as usual. Slight echo. Yep, that's because of the change I just made. Okay, let me go back to the other setting. How is that? Is that a little bit better? I don't want to spend too much time messing around with sound. Sounds like I'm in a cavern. Woo. Let me make sure that this is using the correct microphone. Hold on just a moment. Oh, it's using the wrong microphone.
Let me know now if this sounds a whole lot better. How is this? This should sound quite a lot better, as in Zoom was using a different microphone than my microphone I have here. So this should be sounding a whole lot better. Thank you for letting me know. So, okay, so let's get started. Thank you all for joining me tonight. Oh my goodness, I need to turn off the sound on this 21st century device. Oh, my goodness. Let's get that out of there and get my few notes I have here because I do have some documents I'm going to share with you tonight that I'm going to read from the time period. So tonight it is, we'll say that it is January 16th, 1770, Hanover Square, New York City. And I, Mrs. Q, am here at home after experiencing one of the most horrific days in the history of this city, or at least in my lifetime in the city. Mr. Q, as we speak, is downstairs with the other gentlemen. They have taken up arms and are standing in front of the homes, protecting us from soldiers who have decided to run rampant throughout this town in an outrageous, chaotic, and violent attack on the good people of this town. I myself today saw a lady leaving the fly market being pursued by a soldier with him pushing his bayonet into her skirts. I ask you, what kind of man attacks a lady on her way home from shopping? This, I must tell all of you, is what we deal with on a daily basis with the quartering of these soldiers in our town. And something must be done about this, as we are now in the midst of incredibly unacceptable violence on the part of the soldiers and our residents. And this, I'll tell you, is the result of 1 year of discontent in this town as a result of elections held nearly 1 year ago in the year 1769. So 1769, last year, we had our regular elections for our New York Colonial Assembly, and they were held as usual. Now, you may not know what the voting rights are here in the city of New York, so I will let you know. And that is that most all men in New York are eligible to vote, regardless of race or religion. Women do not vote. Virtually all men can vote. There are two ways to qualify to vote. One is as a freeholder, and that is a gentleman who can pay 40 pounds or can show he has an estate valued at 40 pounds or more. And the other is any gentleman who can show he is a working man. So those are all of our artisans, our laborers, our farmers, all of those gentlemen as well. So virtually all of the men are able to vote. So last February, the gentlemen went out to vote for the assembly. And I don't know if you know, but as a result of that election, the political faction that had controlled our assembly for over 10 years, being the Livingston faction, was at last voted out of office and replaced by another prominent faction, the Delancey faction. Well, it wasn't long after that election that accusations of voter fraud arose in the town. All sorts of stories that fraudulent things had taken place during that election. Everything from people being paid off to vote. And I think I have an example here to show you of an affidavit. This one, where on the top, a gentleman says that he was told by a Mr. Isaac Sears. It says on the morning of the vote, Isaac Sears came to his father's house. Isaac Sears is a gentleman in this town. Of those men who called Sears appeared and told him that if he voted against Mr. Scott, that the Board of Commerce would give him inspection of all the flour they shipped. In other words, he would get a job. And that if the assembly did not appoint him as the sole inspector, the Board of Commerce would. In other words, Mr. Sears was offering this gentleman a job to vote against, to vote for Mr. Scott. And it's sworn on the 23rd day of last year, Mr. Andrew Marshak, who says that, he was approached and told to vote in this project. That's my surprise affidavit that one of those men called sons of voter fraud. This might be surprising to some of you, but we also have affidavits that voter fraud occurred on the other side as well, with people being told by the other faction, the Delancey faction, that if they did not vote in favor of the Delancey faction, that they would lose their contracts and lose their jobs and employment as well. So we have affidavits on both sides. And I think I have the notice here of the affidavits on the other side. Give me a moment to find that for you, because I want to be sure you know that I am not making anything up, that it is all documented here in the historical record. Here is the other one, and I believe that is this one, which tells of people being coerced on the other side. And it tells us, this is the next one. I'm sorry. This is the next one. Where is it? That having been industriously propagated, that numbers of the voters of the city and country have long been intimidated at elections and are therefore desirous of voting for the future in a secret manner. And so many people are feeling coerced to vote a certain way in order to ensure that they don't get thrown into debtor's prison, that they don't get prosecuted for tiny little crimes, and that they don't lose their jobs and contracts, that we should move to a secret ballot. Because of course, we vote, we have one meeting, everyone attends, and they vote verbally in front of each other. And that's the way it's always been done. But now some of the gentlemen of this town have proposed, has proposed, oh no, I'm getting, my sound is messing up. Are you still having trouble hearing me? Are people still having trouble? It's in and out. Well, this is very strange here. Let me check. My microphone keeps going in and out. Oh, is my snowball. I'm going to try yet another microphone. Now I've switched to yet another microphone. Tell me how this one sounds. Does this one sound good? I have a bunch of microphones here. Let me know how this one is. This is the camera microphone. It's fluctuating and scratchy. Well, let me know if this one is better, as I haven't had a problem with this, my good microphone before. Let me try all of the connections. Hold on here. So let me ask you, is this microphone better, the one that's connected to the camera? Is this one sounding better? I'm seeing some heads nodding, some thumbs up. Yes. Okay, this one is good. Okay, sounds good. Okay, so let me know, because I have another option if this one is not good either. So the idea being that since people are intimidated by having to give a public vote and are in the fear, thank you, Mrs. McCabe, and Mr. Davis, that people are in fear that they'll lose their jobs, they might be prosecuted for petty crimes, they might have their debts called in, or all sorts of terrible things, that we should move to a secret ballot. Oh, and the uproar over the secret ballot, because there are people on both sides who have an interest in knowing how everyone voted. And I'll show you yet another document that came out about this issue. One of my very favorites, a document that talks about the infamous bribery and corruption surrounding elections in this town. One of my very favorite papers that has circulated around the town. And it says, all the real friends of liberty and our happy Constitution, having with the greatest regret beholded several of our late elections, the most infamous bribery and corruption, and the most brutal debauchery and riot. And many of the poorer people, having deeply felt the aristocratic power, or rather the intolerable tyranny of the great and opulent, who, such is the shocking depravity of the times and their contempt of all public virtue and patriotism, have openly threatened them with the loss of their employment and to arrest them for debt unless they gave their voices as they were directed. And it being evident to all impartial men that nothing else can preserve the freedom and independence of elections and prevent for the future, like the exorbitant influence of the rich over the poor, than a secret method of voting. So very controversial, and calling for a meeting at the coffee house to discuss this matter. So now we have the idea that perhaps we should move to a secret ballot. And although I'm not sharing it with you tonight, ideas have been presented for how to conduct this secret ballot, ways to prevent people from voting multiple times, and to ensure the vote is, shall we say, correct or proper. So this is the big discussion going on in this town over voting. And as you can guess, as I said, both sides really have an interest in knowing how people are voting and being able to coerce the vote in their favor. So we have a little bit of this coming from both sides, but I can tell you, I have a question. Was anyone charged for coercion, or did they get away with it before they worked for the Delanceys, etc.? Well, what happened in the last year is that there were so many charges and accusations from both sides and people refuting them from the opposite sides that it became impossible to ascertain what was true and what was not. But as you can probably guess, it really didn't matter after a while what was true and what was not, because people on this side and people on this side had made up their minds and had decided what the truth was and were now intractable in their beliefs. So now we had the two sides dug in against each other. Now, in the midst of all of this, last December, Captain McDougall wrote a broadside about the whole event. And as you can see, this is a very well-known broadside now to the betrayed inhabitants of the city and colony of New York. And of course, when it came out in mid-December, none of us knew the author, as it was signed only a son of liberty. But as you can see, he lays out step by step over 2 pages all of the voting fraud that took place. And he tells us why he believed that voting fraud happened, or at least the voting fraud on the part of the Delancey side of the election, which of course would be against the Sons of Liberty side. So of course, against Captain McDougall's side. And he tells us the reason for this massive voting fraud, the reason the Delancey family spent so much time and money on winning the vote was so they could take control of the state assembly and appropriate money for the troops in New York, which they have done. Now, you may not think that that is such a big deal, that of course, we have troops in New York and someone ought to pay for them. But I ask you to think back 5 years ago to the Stamp Act, which taxed paper here in America on behalf of the troops that were occupying us. Occupying us, the Crown said, in order to defend us after the French and Indian War. But it was our belief that we didn't need occupying soldiers here, that they were the problem. And you might remember we joined up against the Stamp Act. The colonies united for the first time under the slogan, "No taxation without representation," and successfully defeated the Stamp Act. Well, although we might say that many members of the parliament are not the brightest of those walking the planet, there are some rather smart gentlemen in the parliament, and they immediately passed the Quartering Act, which then required our local governments, for which we do vote, to tax us for the support of the occupying armies. And again, we in the colonies have united against paying that tax. So the Delancey family, upon taking control of the assembly, appropriated 5,000 pounds sterling, a sum the entire colonial government does not have. Maybe we have half of it, so half of it would have to be raised somehow. 5,000 pounds sterling for the protection of the troops, or the support of the troops here in New York. And that is not only outrageous, that amount of money, but we have also now broken the unity of the colonies. The colonies, of course, can only stand united and win against England. We cannot win if we are separated. So all of the colonies in turn now have turned against New York, with Philadelphia even asking us, please send us your Liberty Pole, as it seems you no longer have a use for it. Everyone now has turned against New York. And Captain McDougall here lays all of this out, that New York is now, he says, the scoff and wonder of the colonies for having broken ranks or broken our unity. And he says the reason for this is the Delancey family, who cheated to get into office so they could appropriate the funds and be on the good side of the crown. And for this, Captain McDougall now sits in the jail in the basement of the City Hall at Wall Street, just a few blocks from here. His friends every day go to cheer for him, and he has become a hero for exposing the fraud and being brave enough to not post bail, but to go to jail. So Captain McDougall sits in the jail, and another broadside has recently appeared here in the town. And this one now, I will share it with you, is authored by a gentleman who calls himself Brutus, who might be Captain McDougal. There are rumors that it is Mr. William Livingston. Rather shocking. Mr. Livingston would write such a thing, but friends of mine who have read it insist that this is the writing style of Mr. Livingston. And Brutus goes on to criticize the troops more. Now, I should fill in a little of the story for you and tell you that as a result of the election last year and the Quartering Act and hostilities between the people and the soldiers, many rules have now been enacted by the Common Council limiting the behavior of the soldiers. For instance, they cannot be out after roll call. They can also not carry weapons or be armed in any way. And many of the people who hired soldiers to, work on their docks or worked on their farms or worked in their various shops have now fired them from their jobs. So this, of course, has increased the level of animosity the soldiers have held toward the people of New York and vice versa. So Brutus, whoever he may be, has come out and talked about the poor behavior of the soldiers. And he says, we shouldn't pay an additional penny for the support of these soldiers, as all they do is cause trouble. They destroy public property, they drink, they carouse, they fight, they harass the ladies. And he says, we already pay a tax for the poorhouse, which is home. Ladies, please forgive me for what I'm about to say, but it is necessary for me to get the point across, which is home to their whores and bastards. So Brutus has recently issued this broadside. In response, the soldiers have issued their own broadside. And I have that one for you as well. And I think it's this one. It is. And it is known as God and a Soldier. And it starts out with a bit of a poem from Mr. Rudyard Kipling. And it says, God and a soldier all men do adore, in time of war, but not before. When war is over and all things righted, God is forgotten, the soldier is slighted. And we might say, well, indeed, that is true. But as the broadside continues, they go on to insult the Sons of Liberty, insult them so much so that they will not print the words. I don't know if you can see the lines here. They will not print Sons of Liberty, nor will they print the term Liberty Boys, out of fear that both terms are so profane, they should not be used in a public setting. So just the name of the organization is so offensive and profane, we will not even print it. And they go on to talk about that the true threat to the town, which many people might agree with, is what they call the drunken mob known as the Sons of Liberty, who every week worship a pole stuck in the ground as if it is an idol. And about that, they are speaking about the Liberty Pole. Well, let me tell you, friends, if a huge problem has not arisen over this. As a result of this, one of the gentlemen in the Sons of Liberty, Mr. Isaac Sears and his friend, were walking nearby in the neighborhood known as Golden Hill, and they saw a couple of the soldiers putting this up. And they got into a heated confrontation about this. And wouldn't you know that heated confrontation today has grown to an all-out riot encompassing that neighborhood. So bad, such that I ran home, closed shop, locked it up, and Mr. Q and the gentleman are now down on the street in front of their homes in arms, defending their property from these roving bands of violent soldiers. Why, Mr. Q said that he saw a gentleman on William Street standing in his doorway holding a halberd. Are you familiar with a halberd in your time? There's a very long stick, you might say, or a pole with a scythe at one end and an axe at the other, and holding it in his doorway, diagonally corner to corner, to prevent any soldiers from entering his home and harming his family. And I mentioned to you the lady that I saw being chased up the hill from the fly market with a soldier behind her, bothering her with a bayonet, and some gentleman coming to her rescue, as I could do nothing to help her myself except hurry home in the hopes that no soldiers would pursue me, which I hope they certainly would not do, as I think many of you know from Mr. Q's temperament that he surely would have gone out and shot them if he had heard that any soldier had harassed me in such a manner. And then we would have had an even worse problem, because at least until now, no shots have been fired. The weapons being used have been limited to bayonets, sword, axes, halberds, rocks, and things, which are very deadly, I assure you. But so far, no shots have been fired. So I am comfortably ensconced here in my upstairs parlor. And I'm going to go back to a full view of this lovely parlor for you, because you have seen this in other evenings with me, but from a different point of view. And I just recently found this picture of this wonderful room. It's called the Haverhill Room, and it is in the American wing of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And from the point of view as a visitor, you cannot get this picture, but this picture recently appeared on the Metropolitan Museum's website, and I've been using it as a background. So you can see a little bit better my own upstairs formal parlor. And, you know, of course, the bed is off here to the left, but now you can see, you know, my desk, and you can see a little bit more of the window dressings here. If I move to the side, you can see a little bit more of the window, and you can see the mantle and the fireplace. So a really lovely late 18th century room in the Met. So I thought you would enjoy seeing a little bit more. And the easy chair that you see behind me, the easy chairs, I just learned, were popular for elderly people who needed a softer chair and an easier method of sitting, more comfortable method of sitting. And I also have seen pictures of an easy chair with a hole and a chamber pot attached to the bottom, also for the elderly. So an early version of what we in the 20th century would call a toilet, or maybe an elderly person's chair with a commode attached to it. So we do have those in the 18th century as well, but I would assume one would have to be quite well off to have something like that in their home. But I do have this lovely pink easy chair, as pink is one of my favorite colors. So I enjoy having the pink decor in my home. And the green is a very popular wallpaper and carpet color for this time also. So here we are in a state of decadent violence and decay here in the city of New York, because of the accusation of fraudulent elections, an accusation that could not be proved or refuted accurately from either side. So I believe the only thing we can do now is to move forward with the idea of the secret ballot. I think this is an intriguing idea, to have a secret ballot, although the skeptical part of me says that people who are bad will find ways of tampering with a secret ballot as well. So the lesson for all of us may be that we always must be vigilant in these matters, and that we must be sure to choose people we can trust and depend on to oversee our elections. And that's what the meeting at the coffee house coming up is to be all about. That if we are going to have a secret ballot, how will we ensure that the people who run that will be trustworthy and not paid off by the wealthy families to change votes? So a whole system of numbering the ballots and having a person sign in has been proposed for keeping track of those ballots. So we'll see how that works out. But I think that the terrible thing that has happened here over the last year, and I unfortunately believe that this is going to continue here in colonial America, is that we have taken to dividing into two sides, each having their version of reality and being unable to come to the middle. Now, of course, you know that when we each have our own version of reality, that we can't that we can't reconcile, or we can't prove to most people which is real, only divides us against each other. And that when we are divided against each other, who benefits but the corrupt parliament in London? Because the more we here in America argue with each other and see our neighbors as the threat and the enemy, the less likely we are to look at the wrongdoings of Parliament and the oppressive things that Parliament is doing to us. So maybe there are people on both sides of the realities working in the interest of Parliament to keep us here divided among ourselves. I don't know. Do you think that's too conspiratorial an idea? Are you thinking to yourself, oh, Mrs. Q, surely there are not people that bad? Well, surely there are people that bad. And when you get to be my age, you have met plenty of them, I think. So perhaps there are people working on behalf of the parliament on both sides, provoking us against each other so that we will not turn our faces toward England. I think that is a possibility we should entertain. And I would say that it is my hope that one day we will all see that and we will turn against the corruption in England instead, realizing that while we are oppressed by England, we cannot be free to disagree here. We love to disagree in New York, disagree about everything. We can go out in the afternoon. It can be a perfectly beautiful afternoon. And I might say to Mrs. So-and-so, isn't it a lovely afternoon? And she might turn to me and say, Mrs. Q, the sun is terrible for my complexion. How could you say such a thing? So you see, we argue over everything in New York. No one agrees on anything. But the thing we do agree on is that we love to argue with each other and we want to remain free to do so at our pleasure, and not to all of us be forced to be the same and to be under the rule of a distant government that does not understand us. So we love our diversity here. We love our differences of opinion. We love to argue about everything. And we need to work to ensure that we remain free enough that we can do that. And even out of this accusations of the fraudulent elections, the arguing that's been going back and forth, and even the violence that has occurred today, we're moving now toward having our elections a better way. So even out of that, you can see sometimes something better comes out of conflict, that sometimes it takes conflict to find something better, that we have to work our way through the conflict to get to the other side and something better. So sometimes avoiding conflict at all costs is not the best way. And sometimes we have to work our way through that. Now, I wanted to tell you, in case you haven't seen it on social media, that I have recently been reading an old Roman book written by Petronius. Oh, Ms. Turley likes my sarcasm. Thank you so much, because sometimes the only way a lady is allowed to make her point is through sarcasm and joking. Isn't it true that we ladies cannot often be so direct? So we learn other ways to express ourselves. So thank you very much. I'm glad it is working. Oh, Mrs. Healy tells me in the future, it appears that we are back to square one. Mrs. Healy, there is nothing new under the sun. I think you agree with me on that. So I am reading Petronius Satyricon, written in the 1st century. Now, it's good that Mr. Q is outside, because Mr. Q, of course, is objecting to the fact that I am reading this, and he would be objecting loudly to the fact that I, a lady, would even admit to be reading such a thing, because it is full of graphic romping and debauchery on the part of the main characters. It is 7 different tales of a Roman gentleman and his 16-year-old slave with whom he is in love, traveling around to different places. It's so scandalous, I know. But I came across the one story of a gentleman, Telemachus, who was a freed slave and has become a very powerful gentleman that no one really likes, and has a huge wealthy household. So of course his wife and all of his children are very well off. They have everything they want. They're living in opulence. And he at one point became so upset that he threw up his hands and declared that no one in the household loved him as much as his dog Skylax. And I truly loved that story, because it seemed timeless to me. I mean, this is 1770. That was written 1770 years ago. And it seems that even then, the gentleman of the house could find no one who appreciated and respected him as much as his dog. And I just loved that story. And I am guessing that in your time, there are many people who may say the same, saying that if you want a friend, get a dog. So I very much loved that story. And for those of you in the future who are fans of movies and films, there will be a director in the 20th century named Federico Fellini, who will do Satyricon, a movie based on Petronius stories. And I think that movie was, I think that movie will be scandalous when it comes out as well. And Mrs. Healy is nodding her head. So I think that movie will be scandalous too. So I am reading it very quietly and laughing with my friend Mrs. R about it, but our husbands are not too happy that we're reading it and have asked us not to tell anyone. So I hope you will not tell anyone that I am reading this wonderfully scandalous book, particularly not our pastor, but there are many things he doesn't need to know. So do you have any questions tonight about that election of 1769, the ensuing differences of opinion, the Quartering Act and what it was about, the Battle of Golden Hill, which is going to be the first bloodshed of the American Revolution? Let me remind you that the Boston Massacre will not happen for 5 more weeks. Golden Hill will be the first bloodshed of the American Revolution. Don't let any of those Puritans from Boston tell you otherwise. I hear they're going to try to steal this from us. I've just heard in the future that they will claim they had the first bloodshed. Remember, it was the Battle of Golden Hill. Not that I have anything against Bostonians. I don't know any. Oh, thank heaven, from what I've heard. Of course, I'm sure they've heard that we're just as bad. So no questions from any of you tonight. I'm going to really quickly scroll through the comments you left in case I missed any. I will work on the microphone for next time. Let's see. Thank you all for coming to join me tonight. Oh my goodness, someone is going to call the magistrate. Please don't, as Mr. Q is downstairs in front of the house with his firearm, and it may not go very well, as Mr. Q is in quite a, shall we say, agitated state of mind this evening. I would hate to have anything terrible happen to anyone. Mrs. Wallace says, I'm the best Friday night date. Thank you so much. Mrs. McCabe, yes, I did do a tour of Golden Hill last year. There are 2 of them. There is one I did in my home as Mrs. Q, and you can find that on Facebook and YouTube. The other was with Ariel Vieira of Urbanist or Urbanist Cities on YouTube. So if you go to Ariel's channel, I went out with Ariel all dressed up and we walked the Battle of Golden Hill. So you could go to Ariel's channel or his Facebook page, and that's Urbanist Live or Urbanist Cities on Facebook, on YouTube, and just search for Golden Hill. And I went out as Mrs. Q and we walked Golden Hill. We had a lovely time, and you can take a look at that video also. I very much enjoy collaborating with Ariel. He's wonderful. And I want to also tell you, I'm going to announce this on social media, that Mrs. Q has been invited to become a regular monthly speaker for the Queen's Public Library System. I will be speaking once a month on they're mostly mornings, but I will post the links to those because those will be open to the public, and I'm now going to be a regular speaker for the Queen's Public Library, so that is really fantastic. And if you know anyone who would like to have Mrs. Q speak to their organization, please let me know, as I would hope to be doing some more speaking engagements. I have some other engagements scheduled as Mrs. Q for this year, and I will be happy to dress up and speak on a topic of your choice as Mrs. Q for your organization. So please let me know. And oh, the McCabe's are fans of Ariel. He is really fantastic and a great friend as well. So please, if you have never seen his work, if you're on YouTube, go over to Urbanist Cities. If you're on Facebook, go to Urbanist, and please take a look at Ariel's work. He is absolutely wonderful. And once you start watching him, you won't be able to stop. He's really incredible tour guide. He just walks around cities all over the world and tells you all about them. He's really fantastic. And I think that is all, and I hope to see you all next Friday. I'm working on a video about the real 355 that I'm hoping to have released this week to go along with the new movie that's coming out called The 355, which is a movie in your time about lady spies, but the idea is based on the spy known as 355, and I should have that video out for you this week. So thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next week here from Hanover Square, providing nothing terrible happens until then. Thank you all for joining me. Have a lovely night.